Let us begin our journey of world cinema with one of the most promising cinema of the Middle East, Palestinian cinema. Palestinian cinema can also be called a cinema with a cause. You must be thinking, how can we call it as a cinema with a cause? Well, the reason is quite simple. Films in Palestine are made keeping in mind some social cause or issue. Most of the films are made to create an impact on the minds of the people and thereby bring about a change in the society.
كان يا مكان بيت وبستان ملان ألوان هالبستان أبيض ياسمين وفلي كمان أحمر برقوق ورمان أخضر قصير صبر والتين جني ملياني ألحان.
These films depict the problems and struggles of a common man. Cultural representation also plays an important role in depiction of reality in Palestinian films. Most of the films showcase importance of following Islam, as Palestine is predominantly an Islamic country. But this does not mean that all films focus only on religion. Roots of Palestinian cinema can be traced back to 1935 when Ibrahim Hassan Shireen filmed a 20-minute long movie which documented the visit of Prince Saud to Jerusalem and Jaffa. This event constitutes the starting point of Palestinian cinema, whose history is divided into 4 periods echoing the various stages of the national Palestinian struggle, the theme on which Palestinian cinematic creation has fed and focused. Palestinian cinema, in its attempt to invent, document and crystallize Palestinian history, confront the trauma of the people of Palestine. It offers a depiction of a forgotten past that does not replace the image of the present.
جني ملياني ألحان أسود ولا مر الليل بيدوم.
Palestinian cinema freezes history either in an utopian, idyllic past or in the events of exile and deportation that disrupted it and are reviewed as if they were part of the present. The history of Palestinian film is closely connected to the history of Israeli film and its historical narrative. It is a history of the efforts to recount the Palestinian story against the setting of the Israeli account that has previously silenced it. Thus, the Israeli narrative is confronted and parodied in various Palestinian films, some of which, especially the later ones, attempt to replace the Israeli narrative with a separate, independent Palestinian one. Since the 1980s, Palestinian cinema has been striving to maintain a heterogeneous and open nature despite a political situation that nurtures unity and isolation. These films have been produced in an era of distress, unemployment and oppression, which becomes the common denominator shared by all Palestinians. However, Palestinian cinema also attempts repeatedly in every possible way to break down this image, to take it apart and to reassemble it, drawing from a mosaic of classes, generations, genders, regions and nations.
نعمل كل شيء عشان تسرق نادية منك.
بالضبط البلدية شكل بعض.
انت جاسوس، الكل أكد لي.
كل فهم غلط.
حياتي ما فكرت إنه الحب كان قد وجع.
The journey of Palestinian cinema can be divided into 4 main phases or parts.
الكيس بدك تصير زلمة.
امشي. اتحرك. أنا معهم.
Let us begin with the first phase, which is also referred to as the era of Nakba or disaster. The first period is between 1935 and 1948, the year of the war that compelled most Palestinians to leave their homeland.
زبين. أنت خليته يروح.
The second period between 1948 and 1967, when almost no Palestinian films were produced, is called the Epoch of Silence period. The beginning of the third period, between 1968 and 1982, is marked by the 1967 Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip and the strengthening status of the Palestinian Liberation Organization (PLO) and other Palestinian institutions. Palestinian cinema at that time was created in exile, mostly in Beirut and Lebanon. This period ended in 1982 when PLO members left Beirut following the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. During these years, the principal film production bodies, the Film Institute and the Division of Palestinian Film, halted their operations and almost stopped funding films production. The films that were created during this era are also called by the historian as the cinema of Palestinian Revolution. The fourth period, starting in 1980 and continuing to the present day, is characterized by cinema that is the product of several artists and individual initiatives. Palestinian film directors, whether in exile or in the homeland, were once again being compelled to find their own fundings. In the absence of any institutional support, however, they have also enjoyed creative freedom. Hence, despite pressing demands on cinema to align itself with the aims of the national struggle, diverse, independent, groundbreaking and internationally recognized and esteemed films came out during this time. In Palestine, politics has influenced and guided common man's day-to-day life. After 60 years of occupation, people have tried every means to regain their freedom, but things seem to be moving for worse. This has led to frustration among people who are constantly faced with the risk of losing their jobs as well as lives anytime. This has led to further complications like inability to deal with small issues of day-to-day life and develop deep sense of hopelessness. Palestinian cinema is a national cinema. Throughout its history, it has given form to militant Palestinian nationalism, recounted Palestinian history and sought the place and daily lives of ordinary Palestinian within that history. This delicate fabric of intertwined personal narrative and national history has been closely related to the national traumas. In the early cinema created in 1970s under the sponsorship of the Palestinian organizations, the individual represented the national collective struggle and fate, which was perceived as stagnant and unchanging. During the 1980s, particularly with Mikhail Khalifi's film, past and present became distinct. The individual was set apart from the collective and two time sequences were formed. The first is traumatic time that restores the past in the present. The second is diverse and richly detailed current everyday life. Time in these movies flows simultaneously in two different veins, alternately concealing and revealing each other. Thus, a gap was created that allowed a working through the trauma while reflecting the diverse facets of Palestinian society. On the one hand, the various strata, genders and regions that typify it. On the other, the unity that consolidates it into a unified force with one goal and a single memory.
Hello.
A generation of directors who began their creative endeavor in the late 1980s and during the 1990s have attempted to follow Mikhail Khalifi's footsteps and focus on everyday, mundane Palestinian life, forming through it a personal memory based on testimonies, individual histories and interviews.
عمر لما بدك تحرر بلدك وتقرر انك تثور في ثمن لازم تدفع.
شو ما كلفني الموضوع انا بدي اتجوز نادية.
They attempt to construct the nation's unity through recognition of the heterogeneity of Palestinian society and to shape the flowing time of memory instead of historical time was disrupted to a large extent by two intifadas. In the late 1980s and especially during the 1990s, the present that turned into a series of disaster and defeats was again perceived as a vacant time. Palestinian cinema, created during those years, has oscillated between the option of describing the diversity of Palestinian life and articulating various Palestinian experiences and memories, and the need to unify this variety and delineate the collective traumatic memory. Palestinian cinema has coped in various ways with a history that urged the individual towards the collective and directed present life towards past traumas. One of the most interesting modes of coping with this aspect is the choice in films to present Palestinian unity, people, past and history paradoxically as absentees whose presence is more strongly felt than those of others' actual current realities. Elia Suleiman's Chronicle of a Disappearance is an example of a film structured according to this model. It focuses on the individual's life and family, refusing to present beyond them Palestinian society and its past. Yet, that which is left untold in the film still reverberates in it. Suleiman thus represents the unpresentable, indicating a possibility of spinning national unity and memory out of a lack of such unity and history. A recent documentary film, Laila's Birthday, by Rashid Marshawi, talks about these aspects of life and the time period of Palestine being divided both ideologically and geographically under the lumber of Israeli occupation.
بس قانونيا بتقدرش تقعد حد الشوفير من غير ما تحط إشارة.
قانونيا صباح الخير يا قانون.
Currently in the Gaza Strip, all film projects must be approved by the Hamas Culture Ministry before they can be screened in the public. Independent filmmakers have claimed that the Culture Ministry cracks down on the content not conforming to the Hamas diktat. Formal institutionalized financial support, however, is virtually non-existent, and filmmakers struggle to raise money for their projects. Palestinian cinema confronts the difficulties in narrating Palestinian history and documenting the national and personal life of the Palestinian people. Palestinian cinema offers an abundance of other examples of various, similar, as well as different ways of coping with the same task. Let us end today's session with a quote by Anan Barakat.
بيناتنا خاين، كل واحد فينا مشتبه فيه.
هاي نعمل كل شيء عشان تسرق نادية منك.
ضبط البلدية شكل بعض.
انت جاسوس، الكل اكد لي.
كل فهم غلط.
حياتي ما فكرت.